Give me one sec to get I'm just finalizing some setup. Do I have the ability to share screen?
Too late. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we can have you share screen. We're live now, but yeah, do your setup. That's what the beauty of podcasting is. It's you get to see all the in betweens, everything.
The little foibles and everything else. Yeah, I totally get it. I did a radio show for Cleveland yesterday, and boy, that was it was one of those things where like they have you come on for half an hour for you, and then you're supposed to stay for another hour and a half and like just banter with them, and these guys are, I mean, they're talking about skydiving and stuff. I'm like, guys, I'm here to talk about like neurotech. Like I have no idea. So I don't know how well that one went. This should be a little bit more topical, I think.
I can totally see you as a radio host. So you're saying
I have a face for radio? Is that what you're?
I don't know. People have a vibe for radio. I don't know. You just got the details. So.
Yeah, I actually did a podcast for several years, as did Mei Ling still does.
I'm sorry, Mei Ling, you do podcasting? Is that what you just said?
Yes, yeah. It's called Exceptional Leaders, and we spotlight people who are doing amazing things in the disability space. So you don't have to have a disability, but you have to be focused on uplifting and providing offerings for disability community.
Oh, wow. So I'm working with pros here. I feel a little inadequate at the moment.
No.
Not at all.
No.
We got all this rolling. We're very excited about starting these so-called podcasts because number one, like I think just long form communication on topics that then are public for people to watch is effective. Like it's good to just go in depth about things and see the nuances of the conversation, right? Because it all provides context for what the real problem is that we're talking about or the real topic we're talking about, right? Too buttoned up, you don't really get real stuff out of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Derek.
Sure.
Hey, Lucas, let me just pop in before you get going here. I'm kind of here for support. So if Lucas needs me, he's going to say the wake word, and then I'll put on my screen and Mike, but he's really the show here. Megan is also here as support. So if you find a need, I can pop in and be another personality as part of this, but Lucas is really the main contact.
Okay, sure.
Sound good?
That sounds good. So I'm going to make you all co-hosts just so you all have access if you need to go off the boat and share a screen or something like that.
Yes, and thank you for the correct production of my name is May, like the month.
Yeah, got it. Perfect.
Okay,
You kind of got me with mailing with your email before, so I'm starting to kind of
like mailing and email, but it's mailing.
But yeah, May is correct still for mailing, so that works. Great.
Thank you.
So we also have a alumni here, Shavetta. Love for you to introduce yourself, Shavetta. Share a little bit about why you're here.
Okay. Well, hi. My name is Shavetta. I am a senior at a high school in San Jose, and I'm also a former coding intern for Pilot City. I helped build a forum page for them, and I'm super glad to be here. I'm here to help Derek and give him some moral support during this podcast.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Definitely. You're here. So just to make sure I understand the framing of this right, I'm getting a little tech set up so that I can show sort of in situ sort of what we're talking about, which is I guess a little bit video dependent, right? But my idea with that is that folks that are maybe considering joining the program or considering working with us would tap into the video piece. Is that a fair assumption or?
Yeah, so what this is this is going to be a piece of content that students are going to be watching, and then they'll have context on Cognition and what SpeakPro is and a variety of different offerings you have been building solutions for, and then we'll have a variety of other content that they're also watching as well. So we'll get into a conversation at first. There's no necessarily nothing that you need to necessarily show unless you'd like to kind of get into it and just kind of give people a demo right now. But you're sharing your screen now?
No, that's fine. I'm just making sure it all worked, and I've got my
good.
I've got my wearable queued up here to.
Oh, dang!
Say a few things.
You are prepared.
So the ring light's a little bit much. I might need to. Let's see.
I see. It's all well worth it.
Warm color, the cool color. So in any event, yeah, let's just see how it goes. And
how do I even start the conversation with you wearing that?
I'll wait. We'll put it on as it comes up. Let me just switch to my earbuds so I don't give you guys feedback here.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you all. And I do want to share Shavetta or anyone here who has any particular inserts in the conversation along the way. So any comments, any questions, anything you want to kind of jump in, what I've been finding is a good mechanism without disturbing the conversation, but also inserting your comments and thought perspectives is to unmute yourself, and then I'll recognize you're unmuted and I'll plug you into the conversation along the way. So Lucas, Mei-Ling, Megan, Shavetta, thank you all for being here today. Very excited about talking about Cognition, talking about the work that you're doing, and you're doing some incredible work. Again, I've shared this with you already. I've heard about Andreas and Cognition's work maybe like 4 or 5 years ago when I was rooming with Rafa in our office space, and he was bringing up what SpeakPros was and got fascinated by it. And then at some point I think he popped up the question like, hey, yeah, I have a friend that I used to work with and he's working on developing solutions around allowing people who are disabled in a communication standpoint to be able to actually interact with their environment in a more effective way. And so it's really great to have you give us a little sneak peek of that headset there, as I'm sure we'll approach talking about that. But give us a baseline on what Cognition is, and then I'd like to kind of get into some of your story and how you kind of got here too, Lucas. So
Sure.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I hope my team isn't listening when I say this. I'm sure they will be. But everyone sort of enters into the assistive technology field, I think, for a reason, right? There's a family connection or a personal experience that leads them to do this, and the team of people that we have here could be out there changing the world in any number of different fields. It's just a remarkably talented group that wears a lot of different hats, but they've all decided to sort of join our mission. And it's great. I wake up some mornings and I can't believe I have this job. So just a little context on the company, and then I can talk about my story, and certainly May, your story as well. So Cognition was founded, it's about 5 years old now, by our CEO, Andreas Forslund, who you just mentioned. I didn't know he did all this other stuff. I thought he just paid us. Gosh, the guy, he's never busy at all, right? Right, Mei-Ling? So Andreas he has a really long history in design, which is fantastic, because one of the things that's traditionally been lacking from the assistive technology world, and specifically also the augmentative and alternative communication world, which is a very funnily long term invented by a field that is supposed to make things easier to communicate. I don't know why we chose that. Is old school design, right? A lot of the design principles are informed by like stuff from the 80s. And so there's been a real need, I think, to elevate into the new generation, both in terms of user interface for the software, but also for hardware components. And he was the head of design for Philips for many years. And, so like the smart bulbs, like the shape of those guys and how that all works, this is all Andreas, right? So if you look around your house, I guarantee you can see him in it somewhere. So what he brings to the team is just a great deal of industry connections, as well as this sort of overarching vision of the idea that, people with disabilities should not be second-class citizens, right? I would argue that you could make a case that they're the most marginalized minority group on the planet. And there's far more of them than you realize, but it's the silent minority, right? These are folks that are largely in care homes or stuck at home, and people don't see them. And so we're trying to call attention to that, and we're trying to do it in a way that gives them access to the newest technology first, instead of the other way around, where they sort of get the scraps of, what other people are making for consumer market. So that's kind of the main gist. Andreas got into this specifically because his mother actually was hospitalized with pneumonia and wasn't able to speak for 8 weeks. And he realized, like, gosh, how do I even get like a yes, no in a medical context reliably? Like he really had that experience of understanding the real need for augmentative communication. Some people just sometimes can't speak. And so he's designed a couple of products along the way, culminating in SpeakPro's, our app that's on the market now with about 70,000 users, which I'll talk about as we get to it. And then the top secret, super stealth thing that we've been slaving away on and pretending not to for the last year, but now we can finally talk about, which is the brain-computer interface wearable coupled with a mixed reality display. So. That was a lot about the company. I'll just briefly say, my name's Lucas. I'm a speech language pathologist. My master's degree was actually in applied linguistics, but I decided that I didn't have enough student loan debt. So I went back and got some more, became a speech pathologist and worked clinically in the hospitals and in private practice and schools for years before entering industry. So I made a number of apps, one called Avaz, another called Free Speech, that were born out of need in my own family. And then I was the head of product for Tobii Dynavox for many years, which a lot of people would know that name from gaming, right? They make the eye tracking sort of controllers, but we make them for folks that are paralyzed or things like that. So I was lured away from the big company to the startup world once again. So here we are. And I also managed to cast a hook out into the universe and pull my dear friend Mei Ling along, who's also a speech language pathologist, if you want to introduce yourself at all.
Please.
Yes, thank you, Lucas. I actually refer to him almost like a big brother in the industry. I'm a speech therapist who also loves tech. When the iPad came out in 2010, I was very interested, and by 2012, I was carrying it into all of my clinical sessions across the ages, from preschool all the way through geriatric. And it's just been amazing to be able to engage with apps. And then also working in the AAC area, I've been working from paper-based all the way through tablet. And now what we're working on is just cutting edge technology for people who want to be able to communicate. So this is actually just a joy to be a part of this team and just exciting experience. So thanks, Lucas.
And I also want to just point out that, these aren't just, again, so many words, right? That I'm trying to decipher.
I know, I'm sorry.
Without any pushing any buttons, right? And, the augmented communication, I think, is a really good start. So these are applied speech therapists is what I think you mentioned, right? And then yous are now kind of enthusiasts of tech. And then also yous are also influencers. I mean, like if yous are producing content that's educating people on too, I just want to point out that yous are also you're like the whole stack. I don't know where Audrey has found you all, but that's very exciting to know that yous are really doing it, from A to Z. So
yeah, it's sort of uniquely, I mean, it's a cool opportunity that way. And I guess I'm saying that directly to any folks that are interested in participating in the Pilot City program is, we get to work with language, first of all, which is something that's not completely understood even among neurotypical populations, right? And sort of has implications all across the human experience and, understanding and communication with others. And then we get to look at the entire scope of, physical conditions that people experience throughout their life. And then we get to look at bleeding edge technology and UX design and everything else. And then we get to make sure that it works from birth to grave across every possible population in a way that'll be cleared for Medicaid funding. So it's easy, I would say. It's not like we're tackling just one thing, right? But really, I mean, there's a joke in our field that it's the perfect one if you ever want to have a midlife crisis, because you can just do something else. But one of the great things about Cognition is that we are able to all wear those hats. So I'm very involved in the product and the marketing and obviously the influencer side, the clinical community. I'm deeply engaged, but I'm also working on designing the language system, which is one specific thing I want to talk about later today in context of Pilot City.
Sure. Yeah. So I remember that Cognition, was, I think it was SpeakPros before, right? Just like an app, and then evolved into Cognition at some point. I believe that was what happened. So tell us about that kind of evolution of an app that solved a problem in a really important area, then evolving to a Cognition. Could you share any context on that?
Sure. Sure. I mean, I think the hallmark of it has been, I mean, it's so cliche, but thinking outside the box, right? So doing things that are non-conventional for the industry. Most of augmentative communication is just straight up tablet-based or Windows computers that you tap on or click on or use a switch to manipulate to say individual words, to construct sentences, right? Andreas started out actually by building something called Prose, or well, actually even prior to that, something called the Smart Stone, which was actually a manipulative, like it looks like a worry stone kind of thing that you could swipe in different directions to send alerts to like a caregiver, or like or to say yes or no, or I've fallen, you know, I'm injured. That product is really cool. It was out on market, and really that was born out of his experience with his mom. But that was something that nobody had really done in this space. Is think about like a tactile, manipulative sort of communication mechanism like that. You know, that then led into an app called Prose, which was also gesture based, and that's still actually out in the App Store. That actually had it's 15 minutes, so to speak. It was used by Stephen Colbert on the Night of a Million Stars with Carly Fleischman. So that was neat. I got some real, that's, I think, probably the highest profile primetime coverage of augmentative communication ever. So that was great. And then moving on into SpeakPro, which is, I think, where probably you guys first connected. So SpeakPro is actually an iOS application for either iPhone or iPad. It is a communication app. But there's two very different things about it. The first one is that it uses the front-facing camera and the IR sensors in the iPad to facilitate gaze tracking and head movement, which is really disruptive, because this is an app. We have a new version about to come out that's putting the pricing at $150. Which people might think, ooh, an app, $150, yikes. But an equivalent system from, for example, my previous employer, Tobii Dynavox, is $17,500. So, I mean, we're really witnessing the sort of democratization of assistive technology, and we're going to see a big revolution in the field to come. You know, and another thing that we're about to release is direct integration with Alexa. Which is super cool. Like, I mean, we all think of Alexa as like, hey, neat, like I can figure out what the weather is or whatever. But if you're like, you know, paralyzed in a wheelchair or whatever, and you're able to suddenly turn the lights on and off in your house, turn off the fan, order pizza, change the channel on the TV. I mean, none of this was possible before without caregiver facilitation. So that's just giving another opportunity to participate in activities of daily living without help. Wow, yeah. I keep monologuing. I'll stop talking now.
No, well, I think podcasting is kind of like a monologue system, but I think it's great. I'd like to go to, and by the way, it's all ringing a bell now, because I remember Rafa was telling me like, oh yeah, I know my friend, you know, has a stone. I was like, what, a stone? But you know, I actually started understanding it from that point of view. I forgot about it, which is really exciting, because it really shows evolution of what has been happening, right, with cognition. Surely it is in its iterative moments. So skipping to the pros from the stone, right? Like, what does it do? You know, you download on your app store, iPhone, Android, and you're in the scenario that you want to serve. What do you see? What do you do on it? And what can it do?
So let me actually, I'm going to go ahead and share the iPad that's sitting next to me here on the screen. So if you're listening to audio, I will describe as best as possible, but please see YouTube for further visuals. So this is what we call SpeakPro Unlimited. This is the version of the app that is going to be out in the next few weeks here. It's similar to what is currently in the App Store, which you can download for free and start a free trial. So if anyone wants to experiment with it, feel free. Just search for SpeakPros. Or you can contact us directly, and we'd be happy to set you up. So there's a number of different functions. So there's what we call basics, which are sort of your quick wants and needs in the moment. Yes, no, hello. I need, you know, to see a nurse. These sorts of things that I don't know if the audio came through there. It said it to me in my headphones.
What you could do, Lucas, is not share the screen, and then when you share the screen again, make sure the share sound button is clicked on Zoom.
Aha! Look at this. I'm learning all kinds of.
Yes, they should just make that a standard. I don't know why Zoom doesn't make that a standard, because people get so confused all the time when they don't see it. Do you see it now? There you go.
Got it. Yep. And it's just running me through the little, do you trust this computer thing? Yep. All right. So I'll choose a different one. I feel sick. Right.
I feel sick.
Mm-hmm. We see here.
So, and that voice is adjusted to reflect my manly baritone, of course, but there are many different options in terms of how you can adjust. And that's, in fact, something we've really heavily emphasized is personalization all throughout the app. We try to really be culturally and gender inclusive, and you can make a silly voice if you want to go that way, or you can try to, come as close to your own voice as possible, which is another honestly really nice thing. I remember years ago as a clinician taking a field trip out with a bunch of 18 to 21-year-olds that were AAC users to go to the grocery store. And somebody was asking for help, but all 8 of them used the same synthesized voice. And it was like this Twilight episode of like, where is he? So it really, our voices are a big part of our identity, right? And to be able to afford people that possibility is great. There's a lot of other settings that sort of go into this. Anybody who chooses to join us on the Pilot City work, will certainly get into a great deal of detail. And then, of course, you're welcome to download and check it out yourself. But a few things I would highlight is we offer different keyboard layouts. And one of them in particular is something people may not have seen very much, which is called Linotype. Which really is a frequency organization of letters. So go ahead. No. Right. And that I share that because that'll become relevant when we talk about the wearable a little bit later. It's not a very commonly used keyboard format, but it's great for people that have really profound motor disabilities, right? They can't access all of QWERTY all at once. And then the eye tracking, we do have set up. I'm on the wrong kind of iPad for that. I apologize. So we need to have a newer, basically the last 3 generations of iPad Pro or any iPhone after X will do the head tracking capability. And then here we have the Alexa integration. So we, in addition to the quick phrases and the keyboard, when you type something, you can either, we like to call it say it, send it, save it, right? So you can either say what you've composed, you can save it as a favorite, or you can send it directly to Alexa. But I'll go in, I always got to hear the cheesy Alexa joke. What's she going to say?
I'm not sure why, but National Pickle Day always makes me feel a little sour.
That caused me physical pain.
What's funny is that internally with Pod City, we have this thing called a pickle club. So secret club within Pod City.
Who is the spiciest knight of the round table?
Oh, do you really? I'm
Sriracha.
Who's the spiciest knight? Sriracha. Oh, okay, that was actually pretty good. But I could type in where's the closest Italian, and it's going to say, oh, it's on State Street, over here. And this is all stuff that. And another thing I'd say is that Amazon has been very generous in supporting us in this, and in so much as this, you don't need to own an Alexa because it is an Alexa hub itself. So it's not like it's talking. It says not to talk to anything. It just connects to your Amazon account and you're good to go, which is really fun for me because here from the office, I get to turn the lights on and off on my wife at home while she's doing her remote work and start the music playing and all kinds of things. But for our users, the important bit is that, any of these can be set up with cell phone or cellular wireless data access, right? And then they can be setting reminders, getting directions, all sorts of stuff on the go, which in the past they need to be within range of the Wi-Fi. So a great deal of privacy obviously required in something like Alexa. And I always hear people say like, oh, this microphone is listening to me all the time. Well, just as an anecdote from a natural language processing standpoint, it's actually not listening all the time. There's a little tiny microphone chip that only listens for the sound. Like try it at home, and you can activate your Alexa with just because they chose that name because it is so uncommon of a combination of sounds in English that they can just listen for that in order to start activation of the main system. That's also why they allow. I think a Maz is another one, and then computer's the tough one. There's a few names they let you, but people want to say like, oh, why can't I just name it anything? And it's like, well, for privacy reasons, right? Because we only listen for those things. But the way that the exception basically is that they have never, with the exception of Sonos, actually Sonos has done it. They've never allowed anyone else really to make a hub for Alexa, and certainly they've never allowed anyone to communicate with Alexa without verbalizing, the request. So we have a special sort of arrangement, and we've built an API that sends kind of audio from our device back up to the Amazon cloud and then back. And I'm oversimplifying it, and my engineering team, if they were here, would probably get really tired and fall asleep and explain it more. But I will say that I've always joked that I wish, I've been in this industry for a while now, and I've always said, God, I wish I had 6 months to work on one really big project and just get it done. And I feel like I wished on the monkey's paw, because like the whole world shut down and we were able to get Alexa set up with all the legal work that entailed and everything else. So that's SpeakPro's, and it is there's again 70,000 users. It's a very well accepted solution for literate communicators, right? So folks that already have some knowledge of the alphabet, as opposed to maybe emergent literate where there's more symbol reliance. We use emojis as our symbols instead of some special set. But
yeah, I was going to ask, did you just make those emojis yourself?
No, they're licensed from one of the folks that partners with the IEEE. There actually is like a whole consortium around emoji. And so we didn't choose one specific manufacturer's one because we wanted them to be consistent across all of our devices.
Great.
So
I've been wondering where you find an emoji consortium association. So I'd love to get connected who that is.
It's run by the IEEE. I actually met a guy once who sits on the council, and I was like, what are those conversations like? Like, do you argue like rhubarb versus kale? Like, what's next? But I think they're doing a good job. Like, I love that they just released all these inclusive emojis. It doesn't cover every single use case. Like, you couldn't probably make you couldn't just communicate in emojis, but emoji charades are a lot of fun.
Interesting.
And all of this is kind of part of a story. If you think of somebody with ALS, right? They have a new diagnosis. Maybe they can start using SpeakPros on their phone. They can graduate to the tablet with eye gaze when they lose a little bit more motor control, and then move into our wearable with the same basic UX and language system, and carry all of that personalization and knowledge with them, right?
Okay. So what are some of the top use cases here for the types of people with the right, what conditions are we talking about here that mostly use the Pros platform and your services?
Well, so
give us a little tour.
Sure. I mean, we tend to speak of these populations in three different ways. There's congenital populations, right, which is when you're born with a disability, like Down syndrome, for example. There's acquired disabilities, which would be something like aphasia after a stroke, where you have trouble thinking of the right words. And then there's progressive disabilities, which are things like ALS, Parkinson's, things that have a later life onset. What we've built in SpeakPros, and arguably also for the wearable, is really focused more on those progressive folks, because there is an assumption of presumed literacy, right? So if you are born with a profound cognitive or speech disability, and you don't acquire functional literacy by the time basically your head is big enough for the wearable, then that's going to be challenging to adopt. Exceptions to that, though, are like CP, where some folks can be born with cerebral palsy but have absolutely no cognitive impairment whatsoever. So in fact, we have a Brainiac Council, we call it, which Mei Ling has beautifully orchestrated, which has about 100 people that are both users and high-end clinicians and caregivers. Actually, Mei Ling, do you want to explain that a bit and how? Well, she's waving.
Yes, thanks. It's been actually a very amazing and honored journey to be meeting with people who are so committed to the augmentative and alternative communication space. Right now, we do have almost 100 people who have said yes to participating in this. We're calling it the Brainiac Council. And these are neurologists, speech language pathologists, assistive technology experts, and then people who are using AAC and are very functional with it, or I would even say high functioning, where they are using it to communicate, they are creating content, they are writers, they're just so prolific with it. And then also their families. So we have parents, spouses, caregivers who support the people. So we're getting all different perspectives. of people who are within the AAC community. And what we've been doing is taking them along our journey with us as we are creating different iterations of the headset, and also developing out that software experience. So what is it like when you're actually putting the headset on and interfacing with these components in an augmented reality way, which is very different from the 2D touch tablet from what we've been used to so far. And then also Lucas has brought his linguistic expertise, and we're building out a language system, which is also going to be a little bit different from what they've been used to traditionally. And the way that mainstream people can think about it is texting. So when you're texting and there are predicted words that are coming up for you, what's actually really helpful for you to say what you want to get out in that text quicker. And that's the space that we work in.
And that's like exactly one of the things that I'm hoping to get some help with from Pilot City. So, you know, one of our underlying principles is that we stand by is nothing with us without us, or nothing for us without us, right? So, you know, we have employees with disabilities. Our Brainiac Act Council was involved in everything we do, and I mention it in part because the majority of interest we're seeing is coming from cerebral palsy. To go back to your question. You know, and then a fair amount of ALS, but there's 167 different medical diagnoses that we vetted out from a human factors standpoint for either inclusion or exclusion. So there's a lot of folks out there that could use this. It's about twice the population of New York City globally that could benefit from the wearable. So they're out there. But it's a matter of, you know, our biggest competition really in this field in any sense is awareness. So.
Very, very interesting. And I think education around all these topics, and even because you know, the acronyms are pretty robust in this space, and it's great to know the scoping of this too, right? You're talking about, you know, people who are essentially born with it, you know, or you know, are essentially, you know, they get it at through some kind of an event that they have, you know, or some of the kind of the different ways that people have issues. But the thing is that you're talking about people who typically, they need to have some level of literacy, right? First, in order to have, to use SpeakPros, right? To be able to effectively use all the scenarios. But it sounds like with Alexa and with these different ways that you're creating new feature upgrades, you're opening up the ability for more people to be able to use it, from my understanding.
Right. No, that's a good way of putting it. And I wouldn't necessarily say that it's not usable by people who aren't literate. I mean, it can be configured in such a way that, you know, you just have a couple icons that control Alexa in specific ways and a couple functional phrases, which is frankly what a lot of the products out there do. But what that doesn't capture is something that I feel passionate about, which is the infinite generability of language, right? The fact that with a finite number of words, you can say anything you want in a sentence of any length. And that is a privilege that is afforded to us that has not been to people with speech and language disabilities. And one of the biggest concerns in that regard is, are we really, when we build these things, are we giving them the opportunity to say what they want to say, or just what we've sort of allowed them to say, right? That's a question that I'm wrestling with quite a bit. So,
yeah, and that certainly dovetail into our conversation. And so I want to kind of get some of the infrastructure correct. So in very early days, you got this little kind of assistive technology of just allowing someone to express if they can't even communicate through this kind of stone, right? That occurred before. Pros then occurred to allow people to be able to download an application, to be able to create gestural kind of communication systems so they can identify particular words that they want to say. So you can associate this circle, right? The squiggly circle to yes, or a squiggly circle to, hey, I need a nurse. And you can essentially use gesture to essentially to create and formulate phrases and sentences and commands and whatnot for other people to hear, right? So you're creating gestures to create sentences, phrases and then it would actually say, right, the words, the sentence, the phrase to the person that's looking to assist you, or your caregiver or whatnot, or a person you're having a conversation with, right? So it's like creating more Stephen Hawkings in the world, right? Essentially. And and then now, and then you hit this kind of roadblock of like, okay, well, how can we have them be even more expressive to what their experience is, who they are as a person, maybe even help them find out who they are, right? In a format that allows them to understand their own language through this tool that they are what's perceived as a barrier, right? But really what you're trying to do is open it up so they can have full expression of who they are. So
Precisely. Yep.
tell us about Cognition 1 and what that evolution jump means. And yeah, see, I'm connecting. Oh, I get it. It took me some time.
Yeah,
like,
you see,
what's
this is the thread.
I don't even know what ALS still is. There's all these things, but I get the fundamentals. And so
and just as an aside, by the way, one thing I'm going to start doing on our Facebook page and YouTube, and hey, I'll do it with you guys too if you want, is just make little 5-minute like explain anything videos of like, okay, what is ALS? What is a brain computer interface? How does it work? And I just throwing this out there to anybody listening or watching. Tell me what to make those videos about, because I have a list of things that I want to do, but I've been living and breathing this stuff for so long that I forget. And so I'll lapse into acronym mode, and and then we're in trouble.
No,
so I actually have a prototype. So this is the second iteration of our Cognition 1 hardware. We have 2 more iterations to come before release, which we're looking at early summer. And without further ado, I guess I'll put it on, and then I'll share a screen with some of the more specifics and technicals and get into that in a sec. But here we are. You can see, hopefully on the back there's 6 soft dry electrodes in the back and placed against the occipital lobe, as well as ground and reference electrodes at the temple. Then the AR display, there's actually a variety of different tints to this lens. So we have polarized for outside if people need it, or really clear for inside. The idea is that we want people both to be able to make eye contact, but also to be able to see the speech that's generated. So I'm gonna move up here a little bit, and I'll just demo this very briefly. But I'm using the head pointing modality. If you go to our website, which I'll share in a sec, we have some examples of what the user interface actually looks like from the inside. But right now, I'm essentially within an environment where I have these augmentative or these AR user interface components that are overlaid against the rest of the world. So I can still see my environment, which is great because VR disorients me sometimes. After like an hour, I'll be like, oh, how do my legs work? But here I'm still very much connected and attached to the person in front of me. A lot of the same, in fact, pretty much all of the same communication modalities that I just showed you in prose are present within this AR environment, with a slightly heavier emphasis on pre-programmed phrases for the purpose of what we call rate enhancement, right? We want to help people get their message out as quickly as possible. Like here, I'll just randomly choose something somebody has configured.
The city sucks.
Well, I didn't mean to say that. Let's see. Let's go with something more PG.
Double coffee with old-fashioned plain donut.
Okay, so there we go. So somebody's placing an order. So one thing we like to do is have the engineers and everyone else go out and use these to try to go through their daily living, and figure out like what we're missing. And so it verbalizes. In that case, that's just configured to the raw Siri voice, but the voice stuff will be just as configurable as it was in the other. I was just able to select a pre-programmed phrase. I also could type some. Let's go with actually I'm just going to use prediction here.
And are you on a compute? Are you doing anything with your hands right now, or is it?
Hey, not at all. No, completely hands-free. So that was all just in this case the gyroscope functioning, and the reason for that is because all of our working BCI sort of backends are in the hands of our engineering team in Toronto. Otherwise, I could demonstrate that as well. But we have some videos up of complex use of this, and we'll be making more and sharing them over time. There also is a caregiver application that partners with this that allows you to sort of check on the status of the device. Make alterations to the vocabulary, add new words, those sorts of things. And then anything also that you saw with Alexa there is also possible here. So, which is really cool because as I look around, it's like, you can sort of be looking at the lights and be like, turn off the darn lights. And it just does it. I did it with my brain.
Yeah.
Good.
Let me get this straight, okay? So you got this tool on, right? We can't see it right now, right? Because you're the one that sees it.
Question.
Right. Mhm.
So essentially, it's Alexa powered. Am I correct? So it's a
Well,
command-based system. Well, you have phrases on there that you've pre-programmed. And then does does Pros connect to it? So do the phrases that you have on Pros upload onto that, so you can just use those existing phrases that you already made as favorites?
Yep. So
Okay.
it's sort of the same say it, send it, save it idea. So
Okay.
anything that
Yes.
you, yes, there we go. Here, I'll actually go ahead and take this off, and I can share a little more information. But
Cool.
anything that you type out in the keyboard or the phrases that you have stored, you can either verbalize them, to the person standing in front of you. You also could turn off the sound and just display the text against the visor for privacy, right? Or vice versa. Or you can send it to Alexa. So all the guts of this basically are an iPhone of various different models that you can have a SIM in, and then as you're out and about on the town, do anything you want with Alexa, get directions, pull up recipes, all that. The language system itself and all of the prediction lives on the device. So if you don't have, it's not required to have a cellular connection. You can still go out and communicate. It's just the Alexa thing is the only thing that needs to phone home. So one way to think about it is that what we've built here at Cognition is two things. We've built essentially an access method, or a number of access methods, in the form of, obviously, like you mentioned, the stone, the gestures, the eye tracking on the iPad, and now brain computer interface or gyroscopic head pointing. And then what we've also built is a content layer or an application layer, which is the language system, and then everything that comes along with that. Alexa is integrated into this, but I wouldn't say it is like necessarily Alexa. In fact, Alexa's an opt-in thing if folks don't feel comfortable with the privacy elements. So really, that's another piece of content. And as we move forward in development, I would like to see more. I know that if I personally was, in a situation where I was laying in bed most of the time, I would want Netflix and Angry Birds and anything else that I can get, right? So we're very open to suggestion.
Okay, so gonna do my iterative process here. So you got this headset, and the mission is to evolve it. I'm not assuming that it's all fully where you guys want it to be yet, right? So the goal is to get what they're doing on their phone with Pros to be on a immersive environment, so that it's a more the rate of communication is more seamless, and people can get their ideas out quicker. That, I think, is the general intent, right? And then you can access, it's all synchronized. You can access the phrases and access the information from the app to the Cognition one. And then you can select what you got to select as kind of like your cursor through your eyeballs, and you're doing that eyeball tracking, kind of transferring the iPad over to this headset. And then ultimately, it sounds like what you're looking to do with this tool eventually is allow not just a communication ability and the expression ability through verbal communication, but interaction with the environment, right? I mean, this kind of goes back to some of the background that you mentioned about Andreas, about being the lead designer for Philips Hue, and them having smart bulbs now, and there being August smart locks, and there may be all this IoT devices in smart homes, for example, right? So is the intent is for this headset to be able to eventually connect to tools in a home environment, so that people who are disabled, not just through their own circumstances with voice, but with just even the movement, is the intent to give them access to that layer of accessing their environment?
Absolutely. And if you think about it, what is communication at the most general sense, but an attempt to impact your environment, right? Anything I say is designed either to sway your opinion or elicit a response, or have you bring me a glass of water, or give me permission to go to the movies, right? I mean, that's what communication is for. And so what we're doing is extending that paradigm to what we call the 3 C's, right? So what we want to enable is communication, creation, and control. There's also, we want to enable artistic sort of components. And video games, whatever that may be. So I mean, a big differentiator is that even though we have these eye gaze systems and stuff like that, number one, they're always blocking your view of the other person. They got to sit right in front of you. So there's no, it feels like you're distant, whereas this, you can be making eye contact and communicating. And then there's a whole class of people out there that have had like bulbar brainstem strokes, very late stage Parkinson's and ALS that can't move their eyes either. So in those situations, they have no communication modality at all. So this unlocks that for a whole group of people right now that are just completely unserved. The augmentative communication language system, I mean, that's my baby, that's my background, and that's our sort of proving the use case thing. And certainly our focus as a company is on the disability space, but we absolutely are also opening this up to researchers in the industry and developers that want to build other things. Our application layer is currently built in Unity, which means there's a lot of games, even mobile games, things like that, that could easily translate over. We could create a web pop-up. But the release that we're looking at for early summer is really for research and industry by virtue simply of the bureaucracy of the FDA. So we need to still go through a few more hoops for clearance as a medical device before we start funding it to consumers at the beginning of next year.
Okay. So let's now go into the project for students. And we may have to kind of interconnect the layers that we're talking about here, because now essentially what you have is a suite of technology and tools that can enable those with disabilities in general, but predominantly communication, to be able to fully express themselves, to do those 3 C's, right? Communication, creation, and control, right? And so what we're looking to have students do essentially is well, I'm just going to read it, but it's elaborate, right? So we're asking students to assist in the development of a high-tech communication system for people with disabilities. We need students to record their own communications and aid with design, so those who do not have the privilege to speak can be better connected with their culture and community. Now, that's very fascinating, right? You're essentially asking students, hey, how do you talk so that people who are your age can also talk like you, right? So that they're more connected with people like you, so that they feel more part of society, so that they are more connected to society and not as marginalized or put to the side as they are right now.
100%. That's exactly right. I mean, nobody right now, some of these traditional systems, they look like a briefcase, right? Nobody wants to be the kid that goes into the classroom and sets up the briefcase and then can only say yes, no, and I want to go to Burger King, right? You want to be able to communicate like your peers. That's part of the reason why we focused on emojis instead of symbol sets. So yeah, let me summarize a little bit what the opportunity is, because there's really kind of, I mean, I hate to say choose your own adventure. There's a bit of a menu, but really there's this language, sort of gathering and analysis piece. And then there's also an opportunity for anyone who's interested to learn more about neural network design and machine learning as that applies. And so I'll walk through that a little bit here. First of all, if you go to one.cognition.com, I'm sharing this here. This is a landing page that goes through what the product is in some detail with some good visuals. We do have some images of what the user interface looks like from the viewer, although we'll be building some videos of that here soon as well. So if anyone is curious to read more and to see more, and also to for the 1% of you that want to read the tech specs, that's all here. So we have an incredible group of people that's working with us. Tom Gruber is on our board, who is the creator of Siri. We have the former head of Apple's Worldwide Accessibility Group. Tim Jin here, who's pictured, is just a fantastic, if you Google him, he did a TED talk recently using our product, manipulating it with his toes. He's a person with CP. So we have all these great people here, but there's a common thread between them, right? Which is that, like me, we're about 40 and maybe sometimes a little older, up into the 60s. And, one of the things we need to do within, for example, the brain-computer interface paradigm initially is that the way that the brain-computer interface works is through something called visually evoked potentials, specifically steady state visually evoked potentials. And this is one of those explain anything videos I think I need to make. But if you think about like a nerve in your arm, right? Say you have a nerve and it's sending a signal to your brain, and it kind of looks like a sine wave. It's just this kind of steady, yep, I'm still here, your arm's still here. And then somebody comes and pinches you, and all of a sudden you get this spike, like, whoa, like something just happened. Like, this is a big deal. Well, that's an evoked potential. In that case, that would be a tactile evoked potential. And we decided pretty early on that pinching people was not a good way to design a language system. So instead, we're using visually evoked potentials. So what that means is that these interface elements they have different frequencies assigned to them, like 5 hertz, 8 hertz, 12 hertz, 15 hertz. And by looking at the activity in your occipital lobe, we can tell which of those things you're looking at by the evoked potential of the like by the EEG wave. I know that was a lot of words. I'm trying to give the framework essentially of how this works, and also to introduce a constraint, which is that if we try to build an entire ABCD EFG keyboard using those different frequencies, it's going to look like you're at the disco, right? There's going to be a lot of visual noise there. So when people are confined to the brain-computer interface piece, we're really trying to keep it to like 7 or 8 interactive elements at a time, which makes the language system that already was a challenging concept even more challenging. So the work that I've done already is looking at SMSs from various university campus corpora. There's actually a Santa Barbara corpus of spoken American English. A corpus is just a collection of language. But what there hasn't been in the past is the corpus actually built of the speech of AAC users. So since everybody needs a hobby, and I have a lot of them apparently, I went ahead and made one. And I just asked everyone I knew that was an AAC user to contribute their sort of systems, their history of utterances, their page sets, where they felt comfortable doing so. And so it ended up sort of weighting towards cerebral palsy, but also ALS, arterial lateral sclerosis, also known as motor neuron disease, since you mentioned the ALS acronym. Aphasia, which is a secondary to a stroke or brain injury, and then Rett syndrome, which is a paralysis condition that only affects women. So they contributed these. What I did is I went ahead and disidentified them, removed duplicates, injected some other words that we know clinically to be useful, ran them through some tools for sentiment analysis and tagged them for grammar. And then we used a tool called Human Loop, which is a neural net training model, and had AAC users and clinicians go through and just answer questions like, would you ever say this? What context would you say it in? Would you say it differently? Would you say, like, what does it mean when you say I take at the doctor's office versus when you say I take when someone offers you tea, right? How can we use things like the user's location, the time of day, the rest of the conversation to accurately predict? Because when you have that few elements, the more intelligence we can apply to intelligent prediction, the more effective it's going to be for them getting out and answer quickly. And then we generously were given sort of a scholarship as a technology for better world sort of thing by an AI company called Accio. And so I am able to borrow this mainframe of theirs to crunch neural networks. In fact, it's training one right now. But let me give you an example of what that looks like. And I promise you this is all relevant to the question that you asked.
Sure.
So we have here just a kind of rough and tumble implementation of a natural language processing machine learning model. And what it's going to do is it's going to take a phrase that I type in here and it's going to try to guess where it should belong within the system. So I'll type like, I want to take a bath. And it is saying that that's a phrase, that it is declarative, meaning you're just saying something, right? As opposed to interrogative, asking a question and something like that. It's saying the context is hygiene. It probably belongs in the main topic of things, like, and this has to do with the organization we have now, which is basically people, places, things, little words and then look up, and then a subcategory called taking care. And this is actually a good example. So when I collected these corpora, a lot of them were from older adults with ALS, right? And there were two different women that had called their bathroom page the taking care page, right? And so I thought that was adorable and I adopted it. But what we need to do is make sure that these categories and the language we use is also appropriate for like an 18-year-old with CP, right? But I did a pretty good job with that. If I say now, like, my name is, it's going to say, okay, you pretty much could say this in any context. It's something that's about you. You might reference it also in terms of family history, but it also is showing us here that it's incomplete without another word. So we need to have some prediction. It can be customized, probably permanently, right? Like you don't change your name that often, right? So we probably could just set someone's name up. And then configurable, meaning that even at the time of initial setup or through the caregiver app, we could ask questions like, what is your blood type? What allergies do you have? What's your name? And then just immediately insert that into the language system. So what's interesting about this is that, and I'm going to use a little bit more jargon, but this is where this gets fascinating. We've sort of inadvertently built a better prediction model than currently exists, frankly, at least in the mobile phone variety, because what's used through iOS or through Android is called syntactic engram prediction, which is a fancy way of saying it looks at what you wrote and then it thinks about maybe what should come afterwards. And so if you type the word bath, for example, it's going to suggest bathroom, bathrobe, I don't know, what else, bath? Bat? No, that doesn't make sense.
Bathtub.
So bathtub, there we go, right? So, and that's based on, like, Google, for example, made a 1 billion word corpus by scraping the internet, and that's how they do their prediction. So which immediately I would say there's one problem with that, which is that the needs and wants of someone with a profound disability, I would say, are arguably going to automatically be slightly different from those of somebody who's neurotypical and motor-typical, right? So, in any event. But what they don't do is they don't take a look at the rest of the context and what they could look at behind that word. So in our system, if you type the word bath, because you want to get something out quickly, or maybe you can only think of that one word at the time, what we're doing is a hybrid model of syntactic and semantic prediction, or really what I would call it meaning-based prediction. So if you get the meaning out there and you type bath, sure, it can give you the option of adding bathroom, bathrobe, bathtub, but on the left, it's also going to give you the option to say, I want to take a bath. The dog needs a bath, because we don't want, like, these people have already gone through their life, right? They've proven that they can write sentences, in the past. The last thing we want to do now that they're with a progressive disability is waste their time proving that again. So if they can just get out the critical bits, then we can do the rest. So if anybody is interested in joining us on this, there's really two specific asks. One of them is that we need to build a model of what typical language use looks like, especially in sort of the texting modality. For people that are like under 40, ages, 14 to 21, right? Like, what are we missing? Like, somebody the other day told me that I need to make sure that I have sus in the dictionary, right? Because that's like, I guess, Among Us, right? That's and it's little stuff like that don't get me wrong. I'm a hip. I've got a Reddit. I don't have an Instagram. I don't understand Snapchat, but we really need somebody to think about that, not only in terms of the way that the topics and the manner of communication, but also, frankly, some of the things that people need to talk about that people have been uncomfortable addressing in this space, right? We have a section of words on sexuality and how to communicate about that. And I think that we need to acknowledge that communication is a necessary component of consent, right? And there is a lot of victimization that happens in these communities. And if we can give them a way to communicate about it and report it, that's very valuable. And most systems don't do that. So, another example would be cultural sensitivity, right? I mean, topics related to religion, or different value systems. These are all things that, I can take a stab at, but I would much rather have people that sort of live and breathe that help. The second part of the ask is really a learning opportunity for you guys. Is I will teach you everything I know about neural networks and natural language processing and brain computer interface and how we do this. And that it's a very hot and emerging field. And if you set a reminder to see what jobs are available for NLP, you're going to get a whole lot of responses. And and then there's more to it, right? So there's different visualizations we have of this in various ways, but that's the key piece. And I monologued again, so I will stop talking.
Yeah, no, this is thanks for the demonstration. This gives a lot of context of how students would be, what process they're going through to kind of get to what we're looking from them, right? And we distilled it down when we were in our meeting. And so I want to be able to repeat some of those, and maybe we can alter it live, if you will, right? So number one, so let me repeat kind of what the ask is for the project. Essentially, Cognition has this suite of tools, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a downloadable application that assists those with communication disabilities to be able to speak and express themselves through voice and verbal communication, right? And through text. And then we have this headset that they're evolving their suite to be able to start to interact with the environment, be able to actually take the content and phrases and texts and communication expression that was created on the app, the downloadable app, and to be able to transfer up and then synchronize those so that unique phrases and unique words are, connected to each other. And then now what this is essentially is a platform for communication, creation, and what's the last one again?
Control.
Control.
Yeah.
Right?
Sometimes we say consumption too, if you just want to watch a movie, but yeah.
Sure.
There's a bunch of C's. We'll try to just stick with 3.
Yeah. So 3 to 4, 3 to 4, 3 to 5, type of C's.
Yeah, whatever.
And now what they're really looking for is to going back to the fundamentals, right? Of building out the base of expression, right? What the capabilities are for people to have a better experience in communicating, a better experience of be able to control their environment and to create, right?
Yep.
And so for young people, they live in a particular and let's just talk about high school and early college and maybe even some middle school. Let's talk about that age.
Sure.
Let's talk about the kind of 12 to 22 age range, that 10-year decade window, right? There's a lot of trends that go in and go out, trends that evolve and grow, people that represent all these varieties of groups because they represent family and cultural groups. And then you're merging that all in, and there's all this context that people outside that age range don't understand, right? And it's how they communicate, it's how they belong to each other, right? And how they,
or we just catch it later, right? Like if you look at some of the apps that are out there, it'll still have things like, that's rad, you're so hip, and it's like, yeah, it might have worked in like 84, but
and then there's places, right? There's certain places like San Francisco Bay Area has a lot of slang. LA got their slang. California as a whole has their slang. Central Coast, I'm sure, has their slang. New Yorkers got their slang. So there's this place-based kind of communication too, right? And
we can handle that with what's called geofencing by knowing where they are and stuff like that. So yeah, you're nailing it. This is exactly right. This is the opportunity.
And what's interesting is that what you guys are looking to do is to create some kind of sourcing model that allows for people in their own jurisdictions and unique circumstances to be able to contribute information to this engine of expression that people who have disabilities have, so that they can express themselves in a relevant way to people who are in the area. And perhaps they can hear, perhaps they can't hear, but they certainly understand culture, right, through hearing or seeing. Just they can't express it. So they need those tools to create that belonging system. And so essentially Cognition's asking students to contribute your data, right, or your content or your language expression to help train this model to be a bit more relevant so that people who are disconnected from this culture can connect more with you, right?
Yep.
And so one method that we discovered that'd be the easiest to be able to have students contribute and help evolve this engine for the betterment of the world and for the connection of people who are marginalized to connect in is to contribute, how do you talk? You know,
Yep.
how do you
I mean, if you're able
communicate?
to export your corpus of text messages, like we love that. We could use that. If you want to record just conversations between you and a friend, we can handle, we can use the machine learning models to transcribe those and analyze them. So, I mean, at the top level, really, it's just your contribution, just even in that, relatively passive way, would not only really help us, but be something just novel and unique that's never been done, before, which boggles the mind. And then I would argue sort of an extension piece of that is knowing, like, if you were in that situation, like there's a quote that I love, right? That's for most people, technology makes things easier, but for some people, technology makes things possible, right? And it's like, if you can put yourself in the shoes of someone, your age with cerebral palsy or who's had maybe an accident and broke their spine or whatever, what do you expect to do every day that you wouldn't be able to? And how would you want to deal with that? Like, if you see, I'm going to date myself again, but like if you play Candy Crush every day against your mom or whatever, like, I did that for a while, so that's why I think of that, and you suddenly didn't have that ability, that's the kind of input we need to think about, like what we want to afford people inside, the device. So basically we want to learn how to be young and fun again.
Yeah, that's basically the gist. So walk us through the process of how that would happen. In a very logistical way, right? So I think there's a few sources of how students can contribute their culture, right, to the engine, right? The easiest one that we're identifying that we talked about was your text messages. So a history of text messages, it could be, I don't know, all the it could be a variety of different applications that they have conversation on, right? But the point is, like, a history of messages that you've had somewhere.
Yeah, WhatsApp, whatever it is, sure.
Right. And that is their data. Maybe they can process it, externally from Cognition. It's just they own that. But what they're doing is they're just entering it in so they know what the key phrases are that are mentioned the most or most relevant or whatever, right? So they're identifying, right, a history of messages they have, right, as a source. Maybe they're recording conversations intentionally if they'd like, but depending on history messages, I think it's the best as of now. And then they're putting that into somewhere. So tell us about where that somewhere is, so they can process, what the words are that are said the most or most relevant and so forth. Like, what do they use for that?
Absolutely. So there's a couple different tools that we use. It's a little tough to answer that question as a holistic one because the modality of output of the messages is different across Android and iOS and WhatsApp and Snapchat and blah blah. So what we can do is build a guide for those different things. And I know also I think we were going to make some short videos as tutorials for that. So that's no problem at all. The exporting of the information is one piece. I'll just comment also that we will need to put some piece of paper out there just saying, like, yes, we can use these. And as a part of that, we probably will not. We'll probably need you to not include the other side of the conversation unless that person also wants to be involved. So just little legal privacy stuff there. But that's, we can handle that. We'll furnish all that fun stuff. And then the analysis bit, this is where it starts to enter the choose your own adventure phase. I mean, what I would very much like to do is to get a group of folks and train them how to use some of the stuff that we use, like Calibri, Node.js and graph databases. I mean, there's specific software that is designed for this that doesn't really require coding, but does require, the creation of a spreadsheet, essentially, that, and some rules about how to analyze it. So, especially in situations where maybe you're not sure how much you want to share and, you want to make sure that the names are deleted and all of that, it's probably best for us to give you that software and teach you how to use it. And then you can just hand it over when you feel comfortable. If you are comfortable with things being disidentified, we also can take it and do those things. But honestly, I would prefer if folks were willing to do that, because then it also is a really cool opportunity to learn about how this tagging works. And it gives me a chance to then talk to you afterwards and like ask clarifying questions, right? You know, like what was this conversation about? Why did these things come up? You know, all sorts of other things that might be informative.
Yep. Okay. So there's a process. There's a providing the history of content, right? It would be, we'll have to do some kind of probably some kind of process where they're able to contribute, share that information with other people, like Cognition, for example, so you can contextualize it. And maybe that happens before or after, it depends on the situation. And then there's some kind of engine that you're plugging this content in, and then it's identifying, kind of like the tool you just shared, like it's identifying, it's breaking down what is being said, right, and creating data points and associations to it. And then it looks like from there there'd be some kind of subjective analysis, right? So some way where we're looking at all the data together, or students are looking at their own data, and they're evaluating which phrases and words do I use the most, that are most relevant to 2020 or 2021, and are, you know, something that could be used in the future, right, in communication, or at least bookmarked for a 2020 2021 language, right, or maybe verified more towards 2022 in the future, and you know, as it kind of goes along. And then at what point will they take those selected phrases and words and cultural terms and actually help build Cognition in Prose's kind of you know, data set to offer that to people with ALS and with cerebral palsy and with these kind of top categories, so they can access and use it. You know, like how can they get as close as possible to it? Like what do they have to do? To insert it into the Prose app and like type in the words and save it, and then you just get in the back end? How would
good questions? Yeah, so I've been thinking about this since the last time we spoke, and I think the simplest thing for me to do from an engineering standpoint is I'll actually make a web portal on our site that folks can get a login for, and they can log in, and all of the tools can be embedded there, right? You can upload your data, you can analyze your data, you even could build a little tester tool like the one I just demonstrated on your own texts if you want to have fun and see what a mainframe thinks of you. You know, and we also could have a forum, right, where different various contributors could sort of talk about the experience and do some office hours types things and just drop in and answer questions. So I think we can make that pretty fun. As far as actually getting it into the system, so what we do is we take this information, and I won't use all the acronyms, but we ended up handing it off to engineering, who then implement it into first the wearable, and then we're back engineering it into to SpeakPros. So in the interim, what I'm going to do is build sort of an interactive web facsimile of it, right? So you can sort of get a sense of what because one of the things we want to do, for example, is reduce the number of clicks. Like or the hits, we call them, right? Like every time you got to click, that's another second or whatever of navigating through. And if I can get a full sentence built and uttered that's culturally relevant in like 3 hits, then I'm happy, right? You know, but if we're saying, you know, Mary went to Winnipeg to get an umbrella because her dog was cold in the yellow coat, then that's like 80 clicks, and I'm not tackling that one. But the next piece, and this is especially true for folks that are local to sort of the greater LA or San Francisco area, we in the coming months, as we get our third prototype, we'll absolutely be able to let you try it on an experiment. You know, check out the actual Cognition one, the BCI and the head pointing, play with it. So that's definitely possible. If you live outside of that area, we are doing some trips, but they sort of have to be prioritized around meeting people that actually have targeted disabilities, right? Just from a cost standpoint and COVID and everything. So in any event, I'm not saying it's not possible to get you a wearable, and we could certainly, as time goes on, it'll become easier. But if you're in our vicinity, hey, just come hang out. We'll totally play with it with you.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that with what we just said, I think has provided tremendous context and demonstration for what we're talking about here, right?
Anybody still listening? I like to sometimes make a joke like, I like unicorns. And if you type I like unicorns as a comment on this chat, I will give you something for free.
Well, that's definitely a question for Shivetta. So I'd like to yield to now Shivetta, see if you have any particular questions. I know you waited a long time to ask some questions or some comments or whatnot. But I think we covered everything that we need generally for what we want to say and have for students. So Shavetta, from a student perspective, any comments, thoughts, questions, curiosities?
First of all, so I'm studying psychology right now in school, and I think it would have been like one of the best courses I've ever taken to date, and I'm really happy with that. So I'm very glad to be here, especially because a lot of this has to do with neuroscience. And I'm super interested. I'm like super blown away by everything that's going on. So thank you, Mr. Stuber, for all of the demonstrations.
Yeah, of course.
But I do have one question, and this could be a hard question, depending on how you take it. Why is basically my question. So, you've showed up all of these demonstrations, and you've also talked about how Cognition started with like just a yes or no kind of device, and then it went all the way to Cognition 1, right? So why is it important to Cognition that you advance this much? And how important it is to Cognition that your future interns kind of like resonate and relate with this why?
Oh my gosh, what a great question.
Yeah.
I mean, Noam Chomsky, right? Big linguist guy, now a big political guy. He once said, and I don't fully agree with this, but he once said that language or speech specifically is what separates us from any other animal, right? That is the unique capability of humanity. I don't fully agree because I think that people that are unable to speak still qualify as humans. But that sentiment, I think in general, I mean, it is. I originally went to school for computer science, actually, because I was always a math guy, and I always like to take complex ideas and write them out in such a way that you watch them sort of simplify themselves. And people, when related to language and human behavior, typically, I mean, among even high-end researchers, I'll sort of hear people say, oh, it's just really complicated. Like, oh, we can't really account for all that. Or, even Chomsky said there was a black box of language inside people's heads that was just sort of unable to be described by science. And I think that's just code for we don't know how yet, right? And like I referenced the infinite generability or whatever earlier, I think that our ability to communicate and our ability to interact with one another is just one of the most enjoyable and unique things that's afforded to us in our lives. And to have that in any manner sort of unavailable or artificially restricted by somebody else's opinion of what you should say is infuriating to me. So I personally am very motivated by this. I have a family member. I don't normally talk about this, but you asked a good question, so I'll share this. And when she was young, she used to have these tantrums where she'd hit herself in the head really hard all the time. And so I would like restrain her, and I'm like, what's going on? Like, how can I help? Like, please talk to me. But she had no language at all. And finally got her set up with just a really basic cognitive communication system. This is before I was even a speech pathologist. One of the reasons I became a speech pathologist. And she started asking for water. And she had just been dehydrated the entire time, but she didn't understand that this pain she was feeling in her head, like she thought her head was attacking her, right? There wasn't the cause and effect. And if she had just been able to tell me that, I would have known that a year prior, right? And then you think about the use cases of ALS and aphasia and everything else. My grandfather had a stroke and he had aphasia for the end of his life. And I saw him a lot for 10 years and I never once again got to hear him say he loved me, right? And these are things that matter at the end of the day. And so, yes, it's important to me. The language piece is important. The access piece is also important. I mean, and that's just simple stuff. We have a 21-year-old user with CP who's super psyched about this because his lock on his front door is going to be able to sense the Bluetooth of the phone and automatically open the door when he's coming home. So now he doesn't have to like try to crawl out of his chair and open, like, it's like this stuff that we take for granted. So I think that, I think that the evolution from the stone and even my own evolution in the career from building basic apps to doing something like this is, it's partially absolutely to give that subset of people the ability to communicate that they haven't had before, but it's also just to raise the bar and to show people what's possible. Right? This is a small subset of people, and there's medical insurance funding that happens and those sorts of things. But will people talk about it, and will people recognize this community more, and will people now realize that they can apply newer tech? Yes, and that's a win for me. I don't know, Mei Ling, if you have other, I could like start crying and just keep talking. So she's probably already crying. That's why she's like off and on mute.
And no sweat. I think that is a Shavetta. Any particular response to that?
No, I mean, that's really cool. I really like the reason for this, especially like showing what's possible is really important, especially because like we're at this time where everything seems like so impossible. Like, when is this whole pandemic gonna end? No one knows. It doesn't seem possible, right? So I think that's really important. That's really cool. And I also want to ask kind of like an unrelated question in a way.
Sure.
So for your future interns, the ones who will be joining Cognition, what exactly do you look for in them? And this could be like either skills, or this could also be like a mindset. So what exactly are you looking for in your interns?
That's another good one. So, I'll say the sort of rote thing is that I'm not so much looking for somebody who's just looking for the extra, bullet point on the college app, right? Although I do write a mean recommendation letter, but I would like somebody to choose this over other opportunities because they're interested in what I just articulated, I guess, about the importance of language and the importance of disability rights and that movement. I mean, certainly those are things that are important to me. And I almost guarantee that we will get contacted by some folks considering the program that have family impact, because people are rarely more than 1 degree away from this. But another thing is just either a willingness to learn, I guess, from the linguistic and the programming side, or any sort of like pre-existing aptitude there. So, I mean, if you're the kind of person who likes talking about grammar, I know there's not many of us, but you'd fit right in. If you're the type of person that likes writing code or analyzing large amounts of data, you'd also fit right in. So, language and math and programming are really kind of the same thing. I like to say language is just math wearing a word hat. It all comes down to equations. So, but I do think that a little bit of pre-existing knowledge would help. And by pre-existing knowledge, I just mean you've taken some high school English classes, because there's some tagging that would need to be done that would require knowledge of noun, verb, those sorts of things.
All right.
And also, you have to be 6'8" and muscular. No, I'm just kidding. I'm trying to come up with arbitrary things now.
All right, Shavetta, you got any other last questions? Otherwise, we'll have Lucas just do any last minute shout outs you have.
I actually don't have any more questions, but thank you for those responses.
Yeah, no, thanks for those questions. That was great. And shout outs for me. I mean, obviously, thank you so much to Andreas Forslund, our CEO. He is one of those people that I think he's a little bit like Wile E. Coyote, right? He'll just run straight off a cliff at 800 miles per hour because he knows it's the right thing to do. And you just, as long as you don't look down, you're going to keep running, right? So just don't look down. He's somebody that encourages us to think different and take big risks. So that's great. Mei Ling Chen has been a partner in crime in this, a fellow speech language pathologist, and just overall a dynamo and really energetic person. And anybody who joins this program is going to really benefit from interacting with her as well. Megan, also, I just see your picture, but Megan, I think primarily keeps our building from burning down, but is also largely responsible for anything having to do with marketing and promotion, which goes hand to hand with a lot of what we're doing in the language system. And then just a blanket shout out to our neuroengineering and biosignals and coding team up in Toronto. They do an incredible job. I would love to have had in particular our engineer, Sarah Pierce, on this call. She's a BCI and biosignals engineer who's about 10 years younger than me and 5 times as smart. And she's another person that would be great to have an opportunity to work with. One thing I'm really proud about with Cognition is I think we're overall 66% female, and engineering it's 80% female, which is like absurdly rare, right? So we definitely talk the talk in terms of including talk the talk and walk the talk, and we walkie-talkie about inclusion across disability, gender, and ethnicity, all of those things. So
very exciting.
Mailing, any thoughts from you? It looks like
yeah, Mailing or Megan, Mailing, please. Any items that you're excited about with this program and the projects?
Well, thank you. Yes, I really appreciate it. I know Lucas does such a great job of representing all the aspects of the company and the project. And it kind of is his baby, this language piece of it. We really are excited with working with a youthful vocabulary. A lot of us have been old timers in the industry. And as Lucas said, home and hearth is something that is warm and fuzzy, but it definitely is a generational context. And so we definitely need to plug into words and phrases and ideation of language that is definitely more in touch with, the younger generation. And so we really appreciate working with you and you being open to doing that. Because if you think about it, you really are giving someone else access to that language through the project if you decide to work with us. So we really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I'm sure that's gonna be words of motivation and inspiration. Megan, any comments you'd like to make? Any thoughts, excitements you'd like to share?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited for our company to be joining on with you guys at Pilot City. My background is actually in education. I used to be a junior high teacher before I came on to here. I'm really grateful Andreas took a chance as well on me. My background is not in marketing. It's all self-taught through doing a startup weekend at UCSB. So I'm excited to get to work with the next generation and see the impact that they'll have on this product, as well as, people's lives. Just by sharing their vocabulary, it really does open up a whole new chapter. So we're definitely excited to get to work with you guys.
All right. And with that, I'm going to end this podcast. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Shavetta, for being alumni co-host. And I'm going to have Cognition stick around for a little bit. Shavetta, feel free to stick around. And we will see you all when you're